Great. All right, and I also want to thank the Seattle Federal Executive Board. So many of the panelists here are on the executive board. The outreach you do makes it more accessible for students to apply and raises awareness about careers in the federal government. And we'll get to hear from you tonight and learn more about what you do. I also want to tell the students a little bit about career services. I recognize a lot of your names and have worked with some of you, but I just want to make sure you all know that career services is here, and we're here to help you through the process of anything career related. As career counselors, we can help you with looking for a job, internship search, resume, cover letter, interviewing. That's just a few of the services we provide. And you can book a virtual or an in-person appointment on our bookings page at CW Career Services. I'm going to put the link in the chat just to make it easy so you can go in and bookmark it. And you might not need it this week or next week, but who knows, maybe next month you'll be in need, and we're here for you. When you go to the bookings page, there's going to be a list of counselors. And so you can go in and click on the counselor that seems like the description. Most of the counselors are related to some department or major, so you find your major, or maybe to the campus. So for example, I serve Linwood students and also online students. Steve also, he serves Pierce students, Des Moines students, and a whole lot of online students. Also, if you're super confused about who to book with someone. We just want you to come in and we want to help you through these processes. So don't worry if you end up with the wrong counselor. There's no such thing. And that's the nice thing about with Zoom appointments in the online world. It's made it really easy for us to connect with you all and get you in to see us. So I'm just going to click on some more participants. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our fabulous panel. And I think I'll start with Andrea. Just so you can introduce the panel and kind of take it from there and let me know if you need me to do anything. So.
Yes, thank you, Merridy. I appreciate it. And thanks for working with us and coordinating with us to put on this really great event. So my name is Andrea Diangco, and I'm very excited to be joining you all this afternoon. I'll be helping to facilitate this discussion, and my colleagues will be introducing themselves shortly. So we're hoping to share with you today advice and resources that may be helpful for you in the future in regards to seeking federal employment. We're looking forward to answering any questions you may have and want to make this discussion the most beneficial for you. So please be thinking of questions you have for our panelists. So before we get started, I do want to provide a brief background about the Seattle Federal Executive Board and the Associates Program. So the Associates Program is a leadership program that is hosted by the Seattle Federal Executive Board. And it's a forum for all regional federal agency leaders to gather and coordinate federal activities. And the Associates Program is a leadership program that's aimed at growing our leadership skills and nurturing our professional development. And so with the exception of David, who's our esteemed advisor in that program, we are all associates in that leadership program. And we are very happy to be here because we get to do events like this and talk to you all. And so I'll just briefly introduce myself and what I do. As I said, my name is Andrea Diangco, and I've been working for the federal government for about 11 years. And I graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in sociology. And I'm currently working as a whistleblower investigator for the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA. And so I investigate complaints of retaliation when employees feel they suffered some sort of adverse action for reporting or blowing the whistle on safety or health concerns in the workplace. So that's enough about me. I will have the panelists introduce themselves. So please introduce yourself, share your background, where you went to school, what did you study, and then ultimately, how did you end up joining the federal workforce? And Leanna, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I would love to go first. Thanks, Andrea. So my name is Leanna Temple. I graduated from Seattle Pacific University just a couple of years ago with a degree in mechanical engineering. and I have been working for the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, for just over 2 years now as an engineer. I would say I stumbled into the federal government a little bit. I was more interested in the FAA for the aviation aspect, is what really drew me in. But the federal workforce has been absolutely lovely so far, and I'm really glad of the decision that I made.
Kayleigh, would you like to go next?
Yeah, and I first off wanted to point out that this is a ginger ale. I realized I was like sipping from a very beer looking thing, not just yet. But yeah, I'm Kayleigh Summers. I work at NOAA Fisheries. I got a degree in environmental science and in English literature from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And then because I'm a nerd, I also went and got my PhD at Duke University. And I was really interested at that time in urban stream ecology, but also I learned just a ton about environmental science and ecology in general. And I moved out here to Seattle and ended up applying to lots of different jobs, but they were generally focused in different levels of government because I knew I was really interested in being using science to help make really informed decisions and manage natural resources. So I ended up applying for a job looking at fisheries bycatch that I basically applied for as like, I've applied for a million other things. Why not throw my hat in the ring for this as well, even though I don't have any fisheries background or ocean background. And then they interviewed me, which I was like, okay, they're rounding out their numbers. And then they offered me the job. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I've been in that position for about 7 years now. And I have really liked it. I've gotten to use a lot of the skills that I learned during school, but in a really different way. And I've also just learned a lot about the federal workforce. And even though I have a PhD, which I think can be a little seem a little scary. I work with a lot of people that don't have PhDs, and I do a lot of work that doesn't necessarily connect as much to my PhD and is more about being able to work with people and think about difficult questions.
Thank you, Kayleigh. David, I know that you're driving, but if you're in a good spot, would you like to go next and introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. I hope you can hear me okay. So my name is David Sheppard. I am the Regional Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Commerce, also the Inspector General. I grew up in Washington, D.C. I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. I have an accounting degree, and I am moved out to Seattle in 2001 for this position. How I got started in government was my grandmother told me that I had a job offer with one of the big 8 accounting firms I had back at the time. But my grandmother said that I needed to get a job, I needed to work right now, and the accounting firm job was going to start until October. So this government thing was just going to be a summer job for me. But they sent me on some trips down to Caribbean and all over the United States. And I think my first trip was down to the Caribbean. I said, I like this. And we're doing some interesting things with international trade. And so I stayed. And it was actually one of the best decisions that I've ever made. And so now I'm out here doing this work. I've been the Inspector General for a small agency up in Alaska, the Benoni Commission. I've been the regional IG. I've been the director of different programs within Commerce OIG. And, it hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows, but for the most part, it's been a really good ride. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And last but not least, Jeremy.
Thanks, Andrea. So my name is Jeremy Mott. I currently work for the U.S. General Services Administration. I have about 15 years, coming up on 15 years in the federal government. Where I went to school. So I graduated from the University of Louisville with a degree in electrical engineering. And then I got a Master of Public Administration there. And then continued, I actually was hired to the federal government as a co-op in my engineering program. And yeah, got the MPA while I was working. And then I took a little bit of a break from federal service while I was over in Germany. I actually worked for the federal government in Germany. And I got another master's degree in institutional economics. And yeah, found my way back to the States out here in the Seattle area. Yeah, and so over time I've worked, I originally started working for the Navy for NAVSEA as an engineer. And then I worked for an defense security cooperation agency in Germany for 7 years. And then that's when I took my sort of step back from federal service and did another degree. And now I work for the General Services Administration.
Thank you, Jeremy. And so for our next question, if each of the panelists, can you please share about your current role and what does your typical day look like? Let's start with Jeremy.
So my current role, I should preface this with I'm actually between roles right now. I got a new job. I will be moving to the Department of Transportation in about a month. But currently I work for the General Services Administration, which is a pretty anodyne sounding agency, pretty boring. But my portion of the GSA is called the Federal Acquisition Service. And specifically I work with professional services and human capital contractors. And so all sorts of federal agencies have contracts to do all sorts of things. Federal agencies tend to do a lot more work than they have the manning, the staffing to accomplish. So they contract a lot of that stuff out. And the GSA is sort of an intermediary for these contracts. And so there's a lot of professional services contractors out there like consultants. And I work for the GSA, and in my capacity, I basically do contract compliance reviews for these contractors. And so on a regular basis, we ask them to open their books for us and make sure they're, providing their federal customers, be it the Army or the Navy or NOAA or FAA, the best value product and at the right price, and that they're compliant with all of their contractual arrangements. So yeah, a typical day for me would be, and since I've started with the GSA, everything's been virtual. So a typical day for me might be a meeting with 4 or 5 contract representatives, like their controllers and their accountants, and sometimes the presidents and CEOs sit in on the calls, and basically talk through their contract compliance with their customer agencies. So I don't actually touch or am involved with the contracts. It's a little bit more abstract than that, but it's basically an oversight function.
Kayleigh.
Yeah, so I'm a scientist, and the program I work for is the Fisheries Observer Program. And what we do is we send trained biologists out on fishing boats so that they can keep track of fish that are discarded at sea by the fishing industry, because when you're throwing back the fish into the ocean, we don't necessarily have a great way to keep track of that otherwise. So that's really helpful for us to understand how we're impacting species that aren't necessarily being sold, as well as marine mammals and seabirds and stuff like that. So stuff that fishermen might encounter and impact, but aren't necessarily bringing back shoreside to sell. And so what I do then is I take this huge database that we have and analyze the data and turn it into reports that are a lot more comprehensible for people that think about management and how to allocate the different resources that we have. So a lot of my day is sitting on a computer, looking at data a lot of different ways and thinking about how to communicate what we're seeing in the data to people who don't necessarily have the expertise or the time to really dig into the data. So kind of taking a million data points and turning it into a few sentences so that people can make really informed decisions. And that is really fun. It's a lot of coding and a lot of playing around with data sets, but also a lot of what I do is to help with that kind of translation process between the data and the managers is working directly with what's called the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, which is basically stakeholders from all up and down the West Coast who have to make the decisions about, okay, these fishers can catch this many fish and these can catch that many fish, and we're going to make sure they don't fish here because we're worried that they'll hurt this whale, stuff like that. So a lot of the work I get to do then is talking through the data that we have and thinking about the ways that we can use that data to make really important decisions that directly impact fishing and also making sure that our fisheries are sustainable. And so that's the stuff that I like the most because the data is really fun to look at and play with, but it's really exciting seeing, how do we actually use that data to make sure that we're protecting our resources and making sure people can still eat really good fresh fish, especially out here in Seattle.
Thanks, Kayleigh. And David, could you please share a little bit more about your current role and what does your typical day look like?
Yeah, sure. I don't know that I have a typical day, unfortunately. I can tell you about my role. So in my office, if you don't know what an inspector general what we do, it's primarily law enforcement, right? Either from a criminal background, so we'll have criminal investigators who go out and investigate, federal crimes against Department of Commerce money. Or it's from an auditing perspective where we'll go out and audit or evaluate programs for effectiveness and efficiency. I have staff in DC, Denver, and Alaska, and here in Seattle. Some of my staff will go out and follow up on some of the recommendations that we've made over the years to see if they've been implemented. So they'll conduct what we call follow-up reviews. Some of my staff will administer and help us to effectively put together our standards and quality control group. Some of us will oversee our auditing tool, which is called Teammate. So we have a group that does that. And then someone just conduct audits, right? And evaluations of programs like Kayleigh's program, NOAA, which is part of Commerce Department. A typical, I guess, a day looks like, just meeting with teams to find out what's going on with programs in their audits. Some of it will entail meeting with commerce officials. In fact, I have some with audit liaisons just earlier today, talking about, how we can better, how the organization, the Commerce Department can better look at some of the recommendations we've put out and make sure that they're being implemented in a timely manner. I mean, the things that we do range, that I do range so significantly in any one particular day that it's really hard to say what honestly to say what a typical day looks like, right? And so if you catch me on any one particular day, you might get, me down in the dirt and trying to figure out, issues related to some of the programs that we are overseeing, and then sometimes it's really high level where we're meeting with departmental officials, political appointees, congressional staffers or members to discuss a wide range of topics related to top management challenges, related to our semi-annual report to Congress, related to some of the audits that we've been conducting, or some of the audits that they want us to conduct, or some of the investigations that they want us to conduct. So it really is a wide-ranging a set of responsibilities. I hope that helps. I hope that answers your question.
Go for it, Leanna.
Yeah, all right. So as a mechanical engineer for the Federal Aviation Administration, my group specifically gets to work on projects within air traffic facilities. So primarily that looks like air traffic control towers, or TRACON is a different facility that handles similar air traffic responsibilities. But let's see, yeah, as an engineer, so we get to work on anything from like a maintenance project that might look like just changing out like an air conditioning system, maybe upgrading an elevator in an air traffic control tower, anything up to much larger scopes, such as like tearing down an old air traffic control tower and building a new one from the ground up. So at any point in time, I am involved in probably 4 to 6 different projects of ranging scopes like that. And as far as the day-to-day, really depends on where we are in that project process. So in the design phase, I'll be working from my computer for the most part, either looking at drawings or doing the in-house design myself on something like an HVAC project. And it's also a lot of coordination, lots of stakeholders involved in projects at a facility. That's so kind of unique as an air traffic control tower. So we'll be talking with air traffic all the time, making sure that the timing is right on projects, because it's a 24-hour facility. So coordination is very important, just making sure that everyone is on board and up to speed on what's going on with the project. And then once we get into a construction phase and things are actually happening at the site, I actually get to do a decent amount of travel sometimes and kind of get boots on the ground and make sure that things are being built and constructed, the specifications and the drawings that I helped create, which I really enjoy. Been doing a little bit less travel since obviously the whole pandemic and everything, but I still get out there fairly often, which is really fun.
Thanks, Leanna. So at this point, we would like to hear what questions you have for the panelists. Feel free to come off mute and ask, or feel free to enter them in the chat, or you can direct message me and then I can call them out. So I actually did receive one. The question is, or multiple questions, what hours do you keep? Is it 9 to 5? How much travel or commute is needed? Do you work from home? How is work-life balance? And we don't have to go in any particular order. Whoever wants to jump in first from the panel.
I'll answer. I'll answer. From my perspective, I try to keep because I have staff in DC, I usually start my day somewhere around 7 a.m. So that I can mesh a little bit closer to what's going on the East Coast, but also have people in Alaska. So I have one person in Alaska, so it has to be considered of that as well, because 7 o'clock a.m. here is 6 a.m. there. My day typically goes to, 4 o'clock, 4:30, which is a long day. But and then I'm a huge believer in work-life balance, and so even though I don't always practice it, I do promote it. And so we do it in our organization. For example, we offer, even before the pandemic, we offered telework, so working from home opportunities. We have, I think it's 3 hours a week that we offer for our employees to have fit time, where you can step away from your job and go to the gym or whatever, right? So that's 3 hours. Our investigators have that, built into their work, but our auditors also get it. But there are times, obviously there are times when we do have to come in on, like when we have to do some work on the weekends, we have to do some work because we're trying to get a project completed, but that's not the norm. It's the exception. Travel, outside of pandemic times, we travel quite a bit, right? I mean, we travel to go to our audit sites. I have teams in various locations, so sometimes I'll travel to go visit them. We have training requirements, so we have to have certain numbers of CPE. We have to have 80 hours of CPE every 2 years and at least 20 a year. It's not always in Seattle, unfortunately, where we have to take those classes. So sometimes we'll have to travel to go to some of those sites for the training. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I could just jump in here, Andrea, too, and say that, in my time with the federal government, I've seen, I've kind of seen it all, and I've seen sort of a shift towards more flexibility and more telework. I've worked in offices where, you were expected to be at the office at certain times. There was a start and end date, and I've worked, at jobs that had travel. This current position that I'm in is very flexible. Your start and end time, you have some flexibility there. A lot of people, myself included, are on an alternative work schedule. So you work 9-hour days and you get every other Friday off. And there's flexibility there with even shifting that day. So a lot of flexibility there. Of course, it's 100% telework for me. I don't know if that speaks good or bad toward work-life balance, but work-life balance is what it is. It is what you make it. And I would say it's probably as good or better than you would encounter in private industry.
Can I just say one other thing? So because of the nature of our job and the work at Commerce Department, we have offices in, I think, 67 countries, in just about every county. And I know NOAA has weather forecast offices all over the United States. I've been really blessed to have the opportunity, and when I was actually going out doing the audit work, to have visited, I don't know, 25 countries, 30, 40 or something like that, cities in about 25 countries. I've been probably to almost every state in the United States doing the work. And so there's a great opportunity, depending on the job you have, to actually get out and see the world and see the United States. And it's been fun. I mean, I'll be honest with you, to travel on the government's dime and to do really good work. Now, I mean, it's a lot of work, right? And so when you're traveling overseas or across the country, I mean, you are working and you are doing, when I'm on travel, I'm usually working a lot harder, a lot longer days, but you still have the weekends, right? So it's fun.
So I did see a question in the chat from Jeff. He asked, could you describe the hiring process you went through? How long from application to first interview? How many interviews? Overall experience?
I answer that one. It can definitely take a while, at least in NOAA Fisheries. I don't know if that's the same across agencies, but I can't remember how long, but I do feel like there was a lot of waiting in between the putting the application in, hearing if you were getting an interview, having the interview, and then the decision-making process. And there is kind of a ticking clock. So it can also be funny where you don't hear anything for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're getting scheduled for an interview later that week and they're going to decide the next week. So it can really depend. One of the biggest things that I would say about applying is that the way that the federal what's it called? Fed jobs? My brain's broken today.
USA Jobs.
There we go. I was like, it's not Fed jobs. USAjobs.gov is the place with all of the listings. And one of the very odd things about applying for those jobs is the way that they get kind of screened through internally. And I'm guessing Merridy and the career folks might know a little bit about this and be able to help out, but there's a lot of weird stuff where you basically have to play like word soup with their list of keywords. So whereas applying to non-federal jobs, I would spend a lot of time like making sure that the writing was really clear and I had a really good narrative. For the federal jobs, I would try to do that, but it was a lot more important to make sure I was getting those keywords in there really explicitly, like not using synonyms for things, like, but saying like, I have, and then listing the skills that they said, and then talking a little bit about them. So I think that there are also some kind of games to know about how to apply to these jobs, especially just to get through that first part, because then once you get through that first part, it does go to people who are kind of goes through HR, and then it goes to people who know a lot more about the actual position, so can understand more and are more knowledgeable. But that first round are people who don't necessarily know about fisheries science. So if I, say statistical models and they're looking for statistical analysis, they might not quite connect those two things.
Yeah, I would second what Kayleigh said. I think with the hiring process, you should expect effectiveness. It's very effective, but if it's efficient, well, you should consider yourself lucky. Yeah, most of my hiring experiences they've all been effective in that sense. Ultimately, I was brought on board with the interviews and whatnot. But they're not always efficient. And yeah, to Kayleigh's point about USA Jobs and resumes and everything, she's spot on. Like, err on the side of more information and rote information and length over conciseness. But yeah, I think on the whole it works. And again, in my time with the federal government and holding 3 or 4 different jobs, I've seen improvement over time, but it's still not the same as private industry.
Can I offer an alternative perspective, please? So as a person who has had the opportunity to hire quite a few folks in my career, I've seen improvements, considerable improvements over the years. In fact, we in our organization, we have a time limit in terms of how long a position will be open, how long we have to actually go through the process of interviewing, hiring, and then bringing someone on board, right? And so, and I think that is prescribed by OPM, not by our organization. And so, which OPM means the Office of Personnel Management. And so they have instructed and informed us that we have to do better in terms of getting announcements out, getting them turned around, getting folks interviewed, and getting them closed. And we take, as an IG shop, obviously, we take that very seriously. And I think that a lot of organizations are trying to improve how we handle and go about that process. I will also say that from my perspective as someone who hires people, I do look for, because one of the things that we need people who can write, right? Who can communicate effectively. And so I am very particular about looking at resumes that convey a sound message and that promote. Someone's mentioned marketing in the chat. Someone who can actually market themselves well, right? So someone who can make a convincing argument to me why I should bring you on as an employee. And so I do look for that when I'm looking at resumes. So if I get a resume that is verbose, that it has a lot of jumbled information in it that isn't appealing to my eye. You know, I get so many resumes. I actually look for reasons to discount folks, right? And that's an easy one for me. And so so how that resume looks is a huge factor in my decision-making process.
Can I just ask a follow-up question, David, about that? So does it go through electronic process first and then you get to see it? Is that okay?
So before I actually get to interview anyone, it has gone through sort of a vetting first to look for, you know, keywords, right? So do you meet the minimum qualifications to actually be in this position, right? And then after that, for our organization, I don't know if every organization is like that, but for our organization, that's how it works. And then we have a group of people who will typically review the applications or what we call is a certification, right? So we'll get a cert, we call it a cert, that has all of the listings of all of the qualified individuals who apply for the position. We'll look at that, someone will look at that cert, and then they'll sort of narrow it down based on their resumes to people to give to me to look to interview, right? They may even have an interview. They may even have an initial panel interview with, you know, a select, you know, some of the folks who have applied, and then I'll get, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 people to interview. But we usually get, like, for one position out here in Seattle, the most recent one that I had, I think we had to shut it down at 100 or so, 150, I think, applicants. And then we just took that first 150 people who made the application, and then we sort of narrowed that down to a smaller group. That was a couple of years ago, though, but that wasn't during the pandemic. Did that answer your question? I hope. Okay, great.
Leanna, did you want to jump in and talk about your application process experience?
I was debating whether or not I should, because my experience was fairly atypical, I think. But the FAA actually came and recruited, so to speak, from my school. So they set up kind of like mini interviews with any engineers who were interested. And that happened really quickly. I heard about the opportunity just like a couple days before the interviewers were going to be on campus. And so it was kind of quick decision making and made sure my resume looked good, and then showed up interview ready. And that was really my first kind of communication with them. And then I actually didn't submit a application through like USA Jobs until afterwards. And then later down the line, I was called back for a more formal interview. But yeah, I highly encourage you, if you have any kind of opportunity like that, to talk to people face to face or go to any kind of job fair or networking event. That's just like priceless FaceTime right there. So definitely jump at those opportunities if they're available.
Thanks, Leanna. I'll just jump in quickly with my own experience. And my first exposure working for the government was through an internship. So during my junior year at the University of Washington, the sociology department had a partnership with a couple federal agencies within the Department of Labor. And so for a quarter, I did an internship with an agency and then also got school credit for it. And just kept in contact with the manager I was working for. And upon my graduation, kept in contact with them, and they reached out to me saying like, hey, we have a full-time position open, please apply. So kind of similar to what Leanna was saying, if you have those kind of opportunities to do face-to-face or have hands-on experience, really consider taking advantage of those. And so I saw that Merridy, she posted a link for the usajobs.gov website. I was also going to point out there is a specific link that has opportunities for current students or recent graduates or those who are pursuing an advanced degree. So there's like certain hiring paths for those. So I can post the link in the chat for that. And while I'm doing that, are there any what other questions do you have? Feel free to come off mute and ask, or again, feel free to enter them into the chat.
And Andrea, I just wanted another follow-up question too. So a lot of students ask about the Pathways programs. How is it different from internships? And they get a little confused about that. Can anybody talk about that and sort of specify?
Yeah, so I can talk about my internship experience. It was not through the pathway, so I can't speak to that, but I can speak to my internship experience. So yeah, so just to expand more on it, it was an internship that I found out through my sociology department, and they had partnered with 2 agencies that deal with enforcing EEO laws, or equal employment opportunity laws. And so I just applied through my sociology department to get that internship opportunity, because obviously they only have limited spots for those who can intern. And so for, I believe it was, gosh, it's been such a long time. I think I want to say it was at minimum 5 hours a week. I went and worked at their agency office and did actual casework and was working with investigators. And so for me, it was great to see the stuff I was learning through my sociology degree being applied to real world examples and work. So really valuable experience in being able to network with the investigators there and with the managers. And then so upon graduation, just kept in contact with the manager, and they had told me they had a full-time position. And so I actually had to apply through USA Jobs. And I don't know, is anyone on the panel, did they get hired through Pathways? I don't think so. Okay.
I have hired someone off of Pathways though.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
And so it's so the difference is the Pathways program is if you get selected from that, your agency can convert you over without having to go through an application process, right? They can convert you straight over to an employee after the end of your and it's really it's called an intern, but it's through the Pathways program, but it's that's the best part about it. Now the part that's not so great is you still have to compete with veterans preference if you through the Pathways program, which means that especially right now when we have a lot of returning military, it can be really challenging to get a federal government position unless you go through, and I can't remember the name of it, it's the Peace Corps, unless you go through like the Peace Corps, or I think there was another agency that has an opportunity for you to join them, and then you can gain that opportunity to join the federal system without having to compete with returning military veterans.
Thanks, David. And I see another question in the chat that Autumn put, and I see that Jeremy put his response too, but I think it's a great question, and we should hear from other panelists. What kind of mobility is there for your career? Are there clear pathways for advancement?
I can speak a little bit about that. I think in my position, it's interesting because there are figuring out what advancement looks like for me is like, that's part of the reason I'm in the associates program, is kind of figuring out, as a scientist, do I want to move into a more supervisory position that will move me a little bit further away from the science, but kind of up the ladder and thinking more bigger picture. And I don't know yet, but I think one thing that I've really liked about my position is that it's really dynamic. So when I came in, it was really focused on just data and coding. And then it moved a lot more into research and then into thinking about fisheries management. And I've also been doing a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work lately. So I've also, for me, just really been appreciating how much, even within the same position, from year to year, my job can look really different. And I'm very encouraged to take on career development and personal development within the same position, and to think about and explore what does career advancement look like for me.
I guess I can answer I can probably address every question because I've been around for so long, but I don't want to take up all the space, right? But I have had, so I did go around through, I did take on different roles in our organization to get to where I am. And when I moved out to Seattle, I took this role as an acting role because I needed some leadership experience as managing, an office. And so the idea was that I was going to move back to DC and then become, the IG of the Department of Defense or something, right? And but I love Seattle so much, I stayed out here. But it was a great opportunity to actually gain the experience that you need for the next job, right? And so if you look at USA Jobs, you'll see that positions have requirements that you have to be able to meet, right? Some of the requirements are experience requirements, some of it is educational requirements, but in the areas where there's experience requirements, sometimes you might have to move around to gain that experience to move up. And so I think I tell the associates all the time that, you can gain experience through non-paid activities as well. So I strongly encourage all of them to volunteer on boards or whatever, to gain the experience that they might not have working in their current job. And so you too, when you fill out your form, I don't remember what the name of the form is, but when your resume for your position, when you apply for it, think about those non-paid things that will contribute to your experience level and getting you moved up the ladder in terms of your qualifications. Yeah, AmeriCorps as well, Merridy. That's absolutely true.
I can quickly chime in about in regards to mobility and advancement. So I work as an investigator, and in my current role, in terms of advancement, there can be what's called they call it a technical expert. So you are the person who's like the go-to person who's going to deal with complex cases, and you're going to be consulting with all the other investigators. And so that's something that I typically see in my field as investigators. There's a technical expert who's above that. And then above that person, in terms of mobility, it's similar to what Kayleigh says. Then you get into the realm of supervisors and managers. So that's also something that I've been taking into consideration. Is that something that I want to be doing in my future, being a supervisor, being in management? In terms of lateral movements, I actually was at a previous agency within the Department of Labor, and then transferred to OSHA. And I feel that doing that lateral transfer actually helped me move higher in terms of pay much faster. So that's something I also really like about the federal government, that doing lateral transfers is something that you can definitely do between agencies and between departments. Okay. And so we're reaching last couple minutes here. Feel free to chime in with last couple questions you may have.
It looks like one student asked regarding age cutoffs, and if if there's ways to obtain waivers for age cutoffs at some agencies.
that's for like law enforcement. That's a challenge, to be honest with you. We have granted that for some of our investigators, but it's extremely rare where they're granted. You know, but the reality is, you. I mean, there are other, like for example, we have criminal investigators, but we also have investigators who aren't criminal investigators, and there's no age requirement for that. So I mean, you can still get in. It's just a matter of doing something else.
Okay. So I'll just pick up with a question here. Okay, I see just another question in the chat. If we are already working for the department we want to be working in, but have career goals, i.e. the VA, if we are GS, how does the training internship work?
I don't know if I understand the question.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on that question?
Hello, my name is Mott Simpkins. How are you?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I've been a federal employee for about 17 years, and I went from the Department of Defense. I now work for the VA. Currently, I go to CWU, and I'm trying to reach new aspirations in the career field. That said, what if I'm a GS employee? I'm a GS employee. How does it work as far as trying to get an internship, you know, or something like that if I'm already a GS employee?
I think I understand what you're saying. You said if you wanted a different job, can you go back down to becoming an intern somewhere? You'd have to leave your current position. I mean, you wouldn't be able to have two positions.
Okay, so if I would have
now I take that back. You could actually get a detail, right? I mean, if you can figure out a way to pursue a detail in the organization that you want to work in, that might be your best option for doing something like that. I have an employee who's actually on a detail with the Council of Inspectors General because she wanted to do more work in the area of training, but that wasn't her job with me. And so we worked with them to get her a detail in that area. And now she's getting that experience, and you know, she wants to go into that field. She can do it now with that experience.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. See, my thing is I can't, you know, I'm a one income family, and I can't go down to either no income or loss of income. So
Right.
I was wondering if there were any type of, you know, internships were more like on the job type of internships.
Yeah, again, I think the detail is going to be the best option for you, because you get paid if on a detail. You're getting paid your current salary. So,
Okay,
and you get
how do
the challenge is finding one, right? And so, I think that the best way to do it is to figure out where you want to go, and then have a conversation with the folks where you want to go, and see if they have any detail opportunities there, and then have a conversation with your leadership to figure out if they'll let you go.
Okay, gotcha.
And, you know, I mean, you're obviously, you know, pursuing more education currently, and that's to some ends. I've changed, whatever, occupational codes or whatever 4 times and not stepped back. So, I mean, it's a bit of a stereotype to think that you can't, you know, switch jobs and advance at the same time. I mean, there is a lot of rigidity there with the you know, the codes and things, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, I agree with Jeremy. I think that you can always move to different jobs and find different positions at other places um, without losing a great deal of your GS scale. So.
Okay, that said, is it literally called a detail? Is that the actual terminology, the HR terminology for it?
So my employee is on an actual detail, yes, to another agency, right? And
Okay.
they have to come up with they'll come up with an MOU between the two agencies, and and in that MOU they'll determine who's going to pay for your salary. In the case of my employee, the other agency is paying us her salary. We still have to pay certain benefits, but they pay for her salary, and so. But I still do her performance appraisals, etc.
Oh, okay.
Well, I want to be respectful of the panel's time. I know we're getting close to the 5 o'clock time. I just want to say thank you. Thanks for sharing your wisdom and your time. I have so many students that are interested in working for the government or really don't quite understand what it means to work for the government. And I know I like what David said about basically, if there's anything that you're done out in the private world, there's equivalent in the federal government, same job. And so that's great to think about, that there's so many opportunities out there. And I also want to encourage students to register in the USA jobs system, because sometimes the openings are only open for 7 days, 10 days, and you really can miss them unless you go in and start there and registering and pick out the different areas where you'd be willing to live and the different subject areas you're interested in. So before we send off, any last minute from the panel? Anything that? No? Okay, well, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate you.
Thanks all. Have a good
Good night.
Thank you all. Thanks, Merridy.